course superintendent, having spent most of my career as a golf course superintendent. And then I had the ability to join the National Park Service for the rehabilitation of the National Mall. And so I'm going to kind of zoom through this. And when we're talking about the rehabilitation of the mall, we're looking at this sward of grass, the Tapes Verde from the Capitol to the Washington Monument. And it looks pretty good from here because all grass looks good from far away or going by fast, one of the two. I think this is both. This is going fast and far away. But you'll start to see where it really is a high traffic turf area. It is some of the most high traffic, I'm told, some of the most high traffic turf anywhere. And it is also, the main green space for that area of DC. It is also a main event area. I mean, everybody, wants to have an event on the mall. They want their, it is a destination for a lot of events and a lot of gatherings and a lot of First Amendment type. Well, here we got some First Amendment. This is, you can see the plaster bones that were left on the mall to protest or bring attention to genocide. So that was one of my first challenges as a turf manager on the mall. We have, in the middle, we have food trucks, which are great for activating an area, but really when you activate an area, you end up with a lot of pressure on turf. And then there's a lot of, just recreationally, there's a lot of recreation leagues. DC is full of people fresh out of college doing internships and wanting to meet people. And so these rec leagues really dominate the green space that we have on the mall. So you also look at some events. This is the Solar Decathlon held in August, where they set up for 2 weeks in the same spot. They build a solar powered house, and you can imagine what this is doing to the turf underneath it. This is Smithsonian. This is a Smithsonian event, the Folklife Festival. I don't know why that skipped my mind. The Folklife Festival, and you can see on the left where they set up, and they set up for a month at a time, and you can see the ghosting that would happen afterwards. And then like you would, after a while, the fall rains would come and it would green back up. But it's going to green back up with crabgrass, goosegrass, knotweed, and that sort of thing. There really wasn't much in the way of permanent grass there by the time we looked at reconstruction. And what it starts to come down to is this is Barack Obama's first inauguration, a picture of that, but the mall is not designed for its current use levels. It has, people don't necessarily think about the landscape as having a carrying capacity, much like you would think about a wedding venue having a carrying capacity. But landscape certainly does have that. And here you'll start to see some of the damage from that inauguration. It was brutally cold, that first inauguration. And, you can just see the damage that was done to it. So really, without a program to put it back together again with really terrible soils, we did a bulk density test on the soil after, I forget who the Penn State, I think it was, I don't remember who the Penn State turf researcher was at the time. The name is escaping me. Broke a soil probe trying to put it in the ground here. But they had the bulk density of a brick when we had it tested. So this is, pretty bad soils, pretty high traffic, and no irrigation and no kind of recovery agronomy. There's almost no management at all when it came to this. It was just a whole confluence of things that led to its decline. You end up with muddy patches and dust and everything else. It's just not a pleasant place to be. You have the Million Man March here and the 4th of July, all these types of events. So then trying to look at a plan to address the soil compaction, the poor drainage, the poor quality turf, and the high volume of dust, all the problems that we saw in our prior pictures of this. So this starts the idea of sustainability, and you guys, you all might see this. I chose a stool instead of a Venn diagram. I think I have a Venn diagram at the end of the presentation for those of you who would like to see a Venn diagram rather than a stool. But I've broken this presentation up into 3 legs for successful high traffic turf. Infrastructure, looking at the root zone, the design, drainage, irrigation, all the stuff that goes into building this the best way possible, the most resilient way possible. Agronomy, just the idea of actually having a turf management staff and having a turf management program, and trying to implement those things to care for the turf. And then it came to venue management, which is actually one of the harder ones to do. The idea of actually controlling how it's used, people management. This is one of the tougher things to actually do. It's politically fraught. It is very tough. And there's the Venn diagram. Everybody will be happy with that, to see the Venn diagram, because it looks pretty close to the same type of thing. So kind of rattling through this, I'm checking my time. The design, a couple of things about designing this. One is you're looking at this was meant, I said Tapas Verde, that was, it was designed to have a continuous green look from the Capitol to the monument, even though you can see some vehicles there. That is actually 3rd Street, on 4th Street rather. That is not, they're not parked on the grass, but the grading plan allowed for not only some good surface drainage, although with the internal drainage we have in there, I don't know how much surface drainage was important, but it does offer that continual, even nice look across. We talked about all those things. And then the other thing was this idea of showing people how to hold events differently, which is kind of strange, but you remember all those events that were set up and the pictures that I showed you before, but looking at these walks and going why aren't we setting up on the walks? And we designed these walks to be able to accommodate certain size tents. We, in the revamp of the mall, we made some walks wider where you could put a tent or a stage without affecting the turf. And that's where the grading plan was really important, to kind of hide those extra wide areas. We started to diminish some of the turf and improve some of the, or enlarge some of the hardscape. Soil engineering. This 18 acres worth of turf was built like a football field or a golf green.
I didn't understand what.
And we won't go into because we don't have time to go into the philosophy of a USGA green or sports field, but you do have the concept of having a higher sand content in your mix to help you with compaction and drainage, and root growth, and water management. Through the use of a perched water table. The only kind of difference is with this middle graphic right here is that our drainage pipes are down 5 feet to kind of help avoid any sort of, at the time they were looking at doing tent stakes and trying to get it out of the way of any sort of potential piercing from tent stakes. Since then we have outlawed or not allowed staking. That doesn't mean that some people don't still do it. We just catch them too late. The NPS is kind of in the forever game, preserve and protect for generations to come. So the idea of having, decades of tent stakes going in and out would probably do some damage to the interfaces in the layering that is essential to this soil system. You can see some of the, you can see here the mix. There were 3 phases of this. The first phase was actually mixing the soil on site, using higher components of soil and compost than sand. It was before they had a turf manager on board. Recycling the soil was a fine idea, but it also recycled all the weed seed. We talked about how earlier on about, all the knotweed. There's poania in there, crabgrass and goosegrass. That weed seed was certainly recycled. And on those phase 1 turf areas, I had much higher disease weed pressure than other areas that we did. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the construction and the drainage, and that there is drainage underneath the National Mall. There's also some smile drains for those of you who build USGA greens are familiar with them. I managed to bring a little bit of golf into the designs because we had some issues where the water would pool against a corner, and we put in some smile drains. The irrigation is really robust. It is also 5 feet down to avoid any sort of rogue stakes. It is also done with HDPE pipe, where that pipe is welded together. It is not put together with fittings. I did not have in the 9 years that I was at the National Mall. I never had a leak out of this, never had a fitting fail because there's no fittings. So that was like, the idea of just making this as robust as possible when it came to infrastructure. Some more pictures of the irrigation going in and everything bedded in sand to, avoid any sort of rock piercing or rock friction against the pipe wall. Also really, really helped. There's a stormwater basin. What people do not know, on the National Mall, we have 1 million gallons worth of stormwater storage. This particular one, it was from phase 1, where the concrete just acts as the skeleton, the shell. It is actually the bladder around the outside that holds the water. This was problematic because if you ever ended up with a leak, how do you fix that? And we did end up with a leak, and then it ended up having to try to find a way to proof it from the inside, which it was not designed to do. Prior ones, cisterns, we looked at, we installed a concrete cistern that could store water and be waterproofed internally, so we still have access to it. This is used for irrigation water when we have it. The pump station is underground. It is on the National Mall, and it is underground. It's one of the nicer pump house pits. If you look at, there's a lot of these areas in DC because of all the fountains, but this one certainly is the nicest one. 1,300 gallons a minute. There are both UV disinfectant and siltation filters. And also looking at seed. The first project, the first phase, they had planned and did a lot of research on using seed from NTEP trials, but they ended up buying sod from a farm that had a soil mix that was similar, sandy soil mix. But they're also using Abbey bluegrass, which is from the 60s. And so the idea, as soon as we put traffic on it, the Abbey just melted away. So, it's just the idea of using NTEPs as a way to pick, the best varieties for what we were looking for. And, we have 2 great facilities nearby with NTEPs. We have the University of Maryland and Virginia Tech. So we're able to, leverage all that data to help put together something. Of course, then you also got to worry about seed availability. It's one thing to put together a nice list of varieties, and the other one's making sure that they're available. There's the bluegrass. We ended up with Barbet, the Barbet mix from HGT, from Barenbrug. And this was really a robust bluegrass, not the greenest bluegrass, not the most pretty bluegrass, but boy, was it tough. It was really, really a great addition. It would actually even outcompete the tall fescue. And in this time, we contract grew it at that sod farm with a little bit of planning to be able to bring that in. I've got probably 3 minutes left. Talk a little bit about the agronomics. A lot of aerating. We aerate twice.
Michael, you can take a few more minutes if you want.
Oh, thanks. But Jeff's got really interesting things to say too. We aerate a couple times a month. And I show this middle picture. I mean, it's certainly not a pretty picture, but what I like about this picture is the idea that our very robust overseeding program and the aeration program. Basically, with this picture, the only grass we got growing here is what has been in the aeration holes. So this made me very, very sure that this was the right type of approach with this. One of our aerations would be a traditional core aerification, and the other aeration would be a deep tine aerification that we would do on a monthly basis. And then we also did some top dressing. The first phase was done with that heavier soil mix that we talked about. So we would be top dressing that mix, treating it like a push-up green to try to improve that soil. We eventually, this person who's mowing the mall is not wearing an NPS uniform because he's not an NPS employee. We ended up going through contracting. It was a really tough culture change to actually get people to mow, rather than like, it might seem like something that we all would take for granted. The idea like, you mow as part of maintenance, and you mow on a schedule and you're training the grass and never removing more than a third of the grass. And you're trying to get that, that nice, tight, dense look. The Park Service was on the idea of like, it didn't look like it needed to be mowed. It didn't need to be mowed. And I am in a weird position. I was more of an agronomist for the park when I was there and a project manager for the project. Then I did not run the maintenance staff. So I only had kind of like soft power when it came to it. But I actually had some decent power when it came to writing up contracts and contracting out the work, which ended up being probably, one, much more cost effective, and then two, a better product. Talked a little bit about how we did a lot of seeding. This is research out of Cornell talking about showing the different rates of just seeding. We have enough traffic that we're always getting it, seed worked into the soil. So, I know that like PGA Tour events used to seed their rough before they had the event because the gallery was going to pound it in. I've got a gallery every day that pounds it in. So that's why we were able to do that. And of all those things that we talk about in all my education, roping things off was probably the most important thing, giving things a rest period when you started to see things decline. We did a lot of that. We tried to rotate which panels. There are 9 of them there, 18 acres, about 2 acres apiece, trying to rotate them so that we could keep grass alive. So that was a very important part, was the idea of rotating and closing these things. I just want to talk about like the philosophy of venue management, the idea of controlling or managing people and managing how it's used. It used to be that people would use, or events would use the mall and then leave and give the Park Service a check to repair it, throw sod down. And that's not that expensive overall, in comparison to trying to do some prevention of damage. It's easy just to destroy a place, throw down sod, and be good. But what that does is put you in a cycle of repair, rest, event. So you never like really have this open for people to use, and you don't have it open a lot because you're most of the time you're either in an event or repair or closed. Like you don't have a lot of access to things. So we had to change that emphasis from damage repair to damage prevention. We wanted people to be done with the mall and be able to the next group be able to come in and look at it and look like it's not, wasn't damaged at all. So that meant like time requirements. They meant time requirements of like, or time limitations. Meant the use of protective decking that was translucent. And not allowing any equipment to operate on the turf. So there's a lot of things that we ended up doing to kind of protect the turf. It added more cost to the events on the front side, but it certainly saved the grass. This is the second inauguration of Barack Obama, where we had only done the first few panels of only up to 7th Street, and we had done phase 1. And afterwards, we had very little damage. And in fact, we had some growth underneath because it's almost like covering a green or covering a field as we're translucent. You can see this grid pattern. They're hollow backed, so they acted like a little bit of a greenhouse. There's a hollow backed flooring. No matter what flooring you put down, this is at the park, but not in the mall. Operating when it's wet is terrible. Operating with a floor that's not floating and connected, it also ends up with damage. And with that, I'm coming to a close. This is, I threw this picture up here because this is from Donald Trump's first inauguration. And it just kind of shows the first inauguration that I did with Barack Obama. It was a kind of a, it was a culture change to do like, 3 panels, 6 acres of panels. And here we did close to 15 acres without even a question. Like we just did it. We changed the culture. Inauguration was coming. They knew they had to protect the turf. So I could actually look at that as one of the biggest successes, was the idea that we implemented something that was a genuine culture change for DC and the park. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, Michael, we do have one question, and I'm not sure if you said it or not, but what was the overall timeline for that rehabilitation of the mall whenever you?
It was it's about 2 years.
Okay.
is what it ended up being. The first phase was 2010 to be done by the end of 2012 to be ready for the 2013 inauguration. And then after that, we were looking at 2014, 2015 that we started in order to be done at the end of 2016 to be ready for the 2017 inauguration. So each one was a couple of years.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, we will move on to you. I think you're muted.
Jeff, you're still muted.
Yeah, you're
Under
muted.
Bottom left.
You might know.
Okay, now I'm up. Okay. Go ahead and share screen again and get to presentation mode and go from there. Okay.
Great.
Okay, I think we're set. Thank you for everybody's patience. And thank you again for the invitation. Really appreciate you all having both of us DC guys here today to speak to you about the fun projects that's been going on in DC over the last several years. So as Chrissy mentioned, I was the, and still am, kind of getting phased out at this point, but the Grassroots Exhibit coordinator. This is a project that started back in 2013. And we built the exhibit in 2014, and it's continued since then. So I want to talk a little bit about the goals of our Turfgrass public outreach and how we were able to use the Grassroots Exhibit to do that. So the Grassroots Exhibit, which was at the National Arboretum, I think I have a slide next up, kind of giving you an overview of the National Arboretum, was part of what we called the Grassroots Initiative. And this was done by the National Turfgrass Federation. And the idea of this was to try to show the benefits of turfgrass, whether that be the recreational, the environmental, the economic, the aesthetic benefits of turfgrass, as well as the important roles that turfgrass plays in the landscape. This was originally scheduled to be a 4 to 5 year project. And now, as we opened in 2014, we're now kind of approaching 7 years with this. We're coming to the time now here in 2021 where this particular exhibit at the Arboretum is going to be sunset, but there's some exciting opportunities that we are working on to kind of continue this concept. So again, with this, really one way to think about this was a massive extension project, right? So we're working with the U.S. National Arboretum that has several 100,000 visitors every year. We're able to put this into a public space that's very prominent near the visitor center. And our target audience with this particular exhibit is the general public, and also garden clubs, garden writers. We know that over the years that typically a lot of horticulture folks, a lot of garden clubs, garden writers, maybe given turf a little bit short shrift over the years. Certainly, we wanted to target landscape designers and show them how different turfgrass species could be used for functionality within the landscape. And in general, just people who would normally not think about turf. So that kind of loops us back around to the general public. So I think from my experience on site there and with speaking to people, the general public typically does not have turfgrass on the forefront of their mind. It's probably not something new to you all, but it certainly is very well illustrated by some of the conversations I have, by some of the conversations I overhear by visitors to the Grassroots exhibit. Just a quick overview on the National Arboretum. It's located about 2 miles from the U.S. Capitol. So just basically up the street from where Michael was down there on the mall. It's 446-acre research and education facility. So the research that the U.S. National Arboretum does relates to finding new varieties, developing better varieties of ornamental landscape plants. And certainly with their facility there in DC that's open to the public, there's an educational aspect to that facility as well. There's a lot of different famous plant collections, National Azalea Collection, National Boxwood Collection, notably the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum, and the National Herb Garden are staples there. And then again, as I mentioned, major clientele, garden writers, garden clubs, native plant societies, landscape architects. They also have the original U.S. Capitol columns that were discarded when the Capitol was kind of I wouldn't say redesigned, but renovated several years ago. And so these were placed there at the U.S. National Arboretum on a 12-acre meadow, and that they're very prominent part of the landscape of the U.S. National Arboretum. So again, we wanted to really try to promote this. This is turf industry promotion to really emphasize the benefits of turfgrass and trying to figure out how we could do that to the general public in an interactive display that had heavy vegetation. So it was a nice little nonprofit being the National Turfgrass Federation, based here in nearby Beltsville, Maryland, and then government partnership with the U.S. National Arboretum, which is part of the USDA. And when we kind of conceived of this, we certainly wanted to put this at a prominent location that was going to have a lot of visitors. And we were fortunate enough to get a 1.3-acre site that was very close to the main entrance, very close to the visitor center. And that site enabled us to really attract a lot of visitors to that particular location. So within this 1.3-acre site, we had 15 different turfgrass species or cultivars. Sometimes we had multiple cultivars of a given species. We had 30 plus different ornamental grass species. So you can kind of see here that within this particular display, this is our lawn display. We also have ornamental grasses that kind of frame a lot of the displays. So we knew that from a design aspect that just putting down turfgrass, grown anywhere from greens height to lawn height, doesn't provide much verticality within the landscape. And so the nice thing about these ornamental grasses is that they give people an opportunity to learn about a lot of the common ornamental grasses that we use here in the East, but also provide a visual verticality to help to kind of architecturally frame the turfgrass displays, again, that don't have much height. Another kind of neat thing here is, whenever you're designing a public exhibit, you want to have some seating. The landscape designers who formulated this scheme thought it would be nice to incorporate some old logs as seating here. So it kind of ties into the what people usually think about with the National Arboretum with trees. So kind of an interesting little concept there with that. And just a side note, NTF was able to coordinate with some local landscape designers out of Baltimore who really kind of did the design for this, and we're able to do the spacing for the different displays that we have within this 1.3 acres. We also had different grass food crops. So we had in the summertime we would plant corn, sorghum, rice, and sugarcane. And during the fall, we would plant wheat, oats, barley, and cereal rye. So we had transition seasonally of different grass crops that are traditionally grown for food. So that's kind of really eye-opening, I think, a lot for the general public to show them what these crops look like, especially within the confines of big metropolitan area and within the DC city limits here. So the 12 displays that we had, again, really highlighted the benefits and uses of turf grass for golf, for sports field, for lawns and landscapes, and also a big part of turf grass, I think, especially in our urban and suburban environment, is stormwater management. So trying to convey that idea to the general public that these green spaces were good for trying to infiltrate water, keep it from running off into our nearby surface water, and really try to help. These plants are helpful for managing stormwater and getting it into the ground. We also had, as you saw in the previous slide, a display of warm and cool season turf grasses from around the country. I think we had 5 different cool season swards, and then we had 7 different warm season swards. I mentioned the displays of food crops and ornamental grasses, and a lot of interactive opportunities for the public. So we also had a golf hole. Here we are with the pond. We actually built this as a USGA putting green. And then we've got it's probably about a 25-yard hole, 25-yard mini hole, showing the tee and the fairway and different aspects of a golf course in miniature, and then signage here that talks about each one of those, whether it be the putting green, the fairway, the rough, the buffer strip here that grew in a little bit more as time went on. Buffer strip between the playable surface and the pond itself. So we were able to kind of bring golf and this idea that golf plays a critical need for recreation, but also for environmental sustainability within a lot of our suburban and urban areas as well. So it's nice to have that golf hole. One of our most popular displays, or probably the most popular display, because so many kids play sports, was this comparison between plastic and Bermuda grass. So a lot of people don't get the opportunity to compare them side by side. And when I was out there talking to people, I would encourage them, especially on hot days, to kind of examine how much cooler it was on the turf grass than it was on the plastic there. We put a couple goals out there. Sometimes the kids went out and kicked the soccer ball around. We also had displays talking about grass structure, and mowing, and how grasses grow from the crown and near the soil level, and kind of evolve from a pasture environment. We also had a kiosk looking at some common lawn pest issues and just kind of communicating some best management practices for addressing those lawn pests. One of the things that we've been looking at here at the USDA, and some of you may know Dr. Scott Warnke, who's a turfgrass researcher here at the USDA in Beltsville. He's been looking at a native grass called Xanthonia spicata for trying to get better seed yield from it, with the hopes of making this more viable from a really low input standpoint. So Xanthonia is native to 46 different states, including DC and Maryland. in Virginia, and it just grows naturally, again, native. But the issue it has is that it gets a choke disease of the seeds. Very difficult to produce seeds, but this is really a super low maintenance grass that he's trying to work on. So we're able to kind of feature that within the exhibit as one of our displays. We had a rain garden that was made out of grasses and sedges to demonstrate grass and sedge use for stormwater management. There's another view of our home lawn display. We also had a fertilizer demonstration showing, showing the difference between, unfertilized plot and a properly fertilized plot, and then talking about some general, fertilizer best management practices for homeowners. We also had an irrigation display. Sorry, I don't have a picture of that, but irrigation display showing different parts of an irrigation system, as well as an interactive showing how the difference between high and too high a pressure and correct pressure, with the correct pressure producing better droplet size, larger droplets that are going to fall down to the soil and not be as prone to be blown away by the wind. So I mentioned the agricultural food crop grasses. We also had a history of the lawn display. So there's another view of our warm season, of a lot of our warm season lawn display here. We had within there the warm season grasses. We had Meyer zoysia, we had 419 Bermuda grass, we had Sundancer buffalo grass, we had Raleigh St. Augustine grass, Tippler centipede, and Seashore paspalum, as well as Zenith. So you see 4 of those right there. Unfortunately, the buffalo grass was taken over by zoysia about 3 years ago when we had 61 inches of rain here, and the buffalo grass just could not handle that much rain. Here's a view of our, again, our rain garden. Not all grasses, but certainly some sedges in there, including Carex nebraskensis. I think you all might be familiar with that in the southern plains. This is Nebraska sedge. Does great in dry conditions, does well in wet conditions as well. And for each of these, I didn't mention a lot about the signs, but we've got these banner signs for each. You can kind of see from a distance here, and they add some visual verticality to the exhibit, which is nice. And then we're able to, in about 75 or 100 words, talk about that particular display and the concepts that we're trying to illustrate. And the U.S. National Arboretum staff, graphics staff, did a great job of helping us with this. The text that we use was actually collaborated on and then vetted by the ASA C5 Turfgrass group. So we felt pretty solid with the messaging that we were putting out here, and definitely wanted to have that buy-in from the C5 group. The one other thing that I'll mention with these banners is that as we move forward, I have offered for folks currently just around Maryland here, but really nationally, that if they're interested in developing a similar exhibit, we have these banners are open access. So we have the files, we have the graphics files for these, just a matter of printing them out. But I feel like we've done a lot of great work. These have been vetted, and we're happy to share the files for these banners. We also had a history of the lawn walk, nice little promenade here with our ornamental grasses, talking about the savannas of Africa and development of food crops in Mesopotamia, and in the 3000 to 4000 BC range, all the way up to Gulf in the Middle Ages, and then up to talking about some of the concepts that Downing and Olmsted really, as fathers of American landscape architecture, tried to promulgate here within this country. And then the last banner talks about turfgrass research. So, I mean, this is all stuff that we know, but for the general public, this is new news. This is people really are taking this up. And you'd have people anywhere from people just kind of wandering through with their kids and not really paying attention to people really spending maybe 30 or 40 or 45 minutes going through each of these displays. So it's kind of very interesting to observe how people interacted. This happens to be our irrigation display here, which I had a close up, but basically we constructed this so that we had a water source here, and then a little faucet valve that you could push for the incorrect pressure, and then one you could push for the correct pressure, and then you could kind of see this against a sheet metal painted backdrop there. So kind of a neat thing. And obviously we don't have a lot of home lawn irrigation here in Maryland, but we had visitors from all over the country. So especially visitors from the Southwest and the Plains and out West were very interested in looking at the irrigation display. Here's our golf display. Occasionally when supervised, we let the kids get out there with the golf clubs. You can imagine with 1,000 square foot putting green, that traffic can add up on that pretty quickly. But it's great to get people kind of exposed to golf who normally would not venture out to a full-size golf course or even to a practice range. So we felt like this was great outreach to these folks. We had little signs, talking about each of the parts of the golf course. This one actually talks a little bit about the fairway and the fact that Zeon zoysia grass, which we used for the fairway, was utilized for the Olympics, for the golf venue in Rio. So we made a little sign about that. A lot of great opportunities to bring student groups out there, not only my own students, but also from 1 or 2 different community colleges in the area as well. I mentioned the for lack of a better term, obviously turf grass is an agricultural grass, but we want to mention the food crops. We had a banner out there talking about the waves of grain and the fact that the top 5 food crops, sugar corn, wheat, and rice, are grasses. You can throw potatoes in there in the top 5, but 4 of the 5 are grasses. We actually experimented a little bit with showing turf grass grown for seed, kind of as a nod to some of the support we got from our Oregon seed growers. So it was kind of neat to be able to see that. Again, a lot of public outreach. We'd have these days where we'd put out the soccer goals, let the kids kick the soccer ball around, and we kind of got people wandering everywhere. So a lot of different visitors, conservation groups, master gardeners groups. We had the professional grounds maintenance society out, different landscape architects out, and we had the American Public Gardens Association conference. And we were one of the featured gardens for the APGA when they hosted that a few years ago. Also, with our proximity to a lot of federal folks here in DC, we had years ago, we had the USDA director, Dr. Chavonda Jacobs out with her office staff. We've been able to speak a little bit with the Office of Science and Technology and Policy folks. We had some events for National Golf Day. We had the EPA Water Sense folks out. This has opened up a lot of opportunities for us, for Kevin Morris and I, with the National Turfgrass Federation, to try to inform these decision makers at the federal level about the importance of turfgrass and subsequently the importance of turfgrass research. And so Kevin's been able to secure additional funding in recent years for turfgrass research on a national level. We've also taken this up the road a little bit. The Maryland Soccerplex is a premier sports field facility about 30 miles away from DC, northwest in central Maryland in Montgomery County. And we were able to secure a statewide grant to help to build this, a little bit smaller than the original Grassroots exhibit at the Arboretum, but nice that landscape management was able to write about us a little bit. This opened up almost 5 years ago. We were able to get a CRI grant, as well as some money from the state, and donations that were made by local vendors to the Soccerplex. So that is currently up there and is ongoing. So it's kind of been fun. One of the great events there was when DC United played a Gold Cup match against a soccer team from Baltimore, and the place was just packed. It's nice because the queue for the ticket office goes right through the exhibit. So there were a ton of people there, and I could just kind of go along and chat with people as they were stuck in line. So that was a fun extension outreach event for me. Another example of the banners here. So here we've got our warm season grasses, or pardon me, we've got cool season grasses to the left, and then warm season grasses. And these graphics kind of show the different growth patterns of each of those grasses. So again, not anything new for us, but for the general public, this is really great Turf 101 knowledge. And within the Maryland Soccerplex, we have 11 different lawn display grasses. I think about 4 cool season and then 7 warm season. It really gives an opportunity to see the varieties, the variety of different grass species that there are available. And we have some mini sports fields as well there. So next steps. So this was originally scheduled to be a 4-year program, and then it got extended another 2 years. And so at this point, the Arboretum is going in another direction. They're supposed to be putting in another exhibit on that particular space. And so I'm being sunsetted sometime during this year. In the meantime, I continue to perform what I would call minimum maintenance on that site to try to keep it looking relatively good and educational. And right now we're in the middle of talks with Montgomery County Golf Course, as well as Parks down at Parks and Rec down at Calvert County in Southern Maryland, to kind of construct grassroots exhibits there to try to continue our ongoing public education and outreach. But the one thing I would leave you with would be that, again, if you all think that this might work at a site in Texas, I feel like we've got a pretty good template of how to do this. And obviously we would adapt it to your local needs there in Texas. But I would encourage you to think about if this is something that you would want to implement as an educational extension exhibit at a venue in Texas. In my mind, it seems like it would be best suited for a public garden or for a sports complex that has a lot of tournaments where, there's families and kids kind of hanging out between games. And this is an opportunity to do a little bit of education while the kids are waiting, between sports games. So we had a lot of great sponsors with this, anywhere from local sponsors to national level sponsors. And so, I always want to thank our sponsors. The NTF was able to raise money for this largely on our own. We funded about 90 to 95% of this. The rest was funded by the National Arboretum. There's my Twitter contact and my email contact. I think that is the last slide there. So with that, go ahead and stop sharing. Well, you know what, I'll keep that up there. But if you have any questions, I haven't been looking at the chat. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. And again, Chrissy, thanks so much for having us today.
Yeah, thank you for coming. There's no questions currently in the chat. So if anyone has any questions about the Grassroots initiative exhibit, go ahead and put those in. But Jeff, I was wondering, and I might have missed it, but do you have any idea how many people visit the Grassroots exhibit every year?
Yes, I didn't mention that, but from doing spot counts, we estimated 25 to 30,000 people a year.
Wow.
And so, you know, what I would do is I would go out there on a Saturday and just count for maybe 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there. And we might have, especially spring weekends were the busiest because everything's in flower, or almost everything's flowering at the Arboretum, and people are ready to get outdoors after the winter. So I could easily count, you know, 700-800 people in a day.
Wow.
On a busy Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of extrapolating out and, you know, so you get to the winter and you might have 2 people on a Tuesday in December, but kind of extrapolating those spot counts, we estimated 25 to 30,000 visitors per year.
Yeah, well, I know that Becky and I got to visit the Grassroots exhibit whenever the crop science was in Baltimore, and I thought it was really neat. It was really cool. The signs were really easy to read and explain things well. And, you know, I didn't really know much about it until we went to that meeting. So I really enjoyed seeing it. It was really cool.
You all should get it going in Texas.
Yeah.
That was like the first real thing that Chrissy and I ever did together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why we both thought of this as a great idea for this week. So
you know, for me, and I'm a teaching appointment here in Maryland, but really I'm an extension person at heart. And this is just a massive extension project.
Right.
So it was just great to be able to get out there, chat with people, and really do a lot of extension education.
Mm-hmm. This could be definitely something we could explore. Like Becky and I were kind of chatting on our own. You know, we do have the Arboretum here. We do have some botanical gardens, and some type of partnership with Texas A&M could probably make it happen if people were really interested. And we had the space.
You have the space, and it doesn't, you know, you don't have to put in all 12 displays.
Right.
But you can mix and match. And again, the fact that we've got the verbiage for the signs, I think is very helpful. It's just a matter of printing those out.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of the work.
Or maybe making a couple adjustments for your local conditions, but we feel like the template is there.
Great.
Laura, what were you going to say? Were you going to volunteer to help us get into the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens?
Yeah, I'll talk to them.
Yeah, I think it would be something pretty interesting. And I don't know how much space they already devote to grasses and stuff, you know, if there's any at all.
So, can you hear me, or my mom just sent me a message and said you cannot hear me, so.
Now I can,
but it's just muffled.
when you first started.
Yeah, well, yes, you know, I do think that this has a lot of potential. I noticed that the Texas Turfgrass Association was one of your supporters. And
They were.
yeah,
Texas Turfgrass Association was a sponsor.
yeah. And actually, there's quite a few sponsors on there that we know. So, certainly has a lot of potential. And I especially enjoyed the incorporation of the grain crops. I think that's a thing that people don't necessarily connect in their mind, but how important those are. So those
All right. Well, we are actually at the end of our hour today. And so it was great, though. We really appreciate the information that you gave us. And so we might petition to move the American Lawn History to another week or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll easily be able to slip it in a future talk. I think this was perfect for today. And
yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
All right. Any lingering questions from the group? Okay, I don't really see any.
Joseph Johnson was on too. You might want to do this at the gardens at Texas A&M. I mean, this is another cool thing, Joseph.
Yeah, we do. We have quite a few numerous varieties out there in the gardens. So
yeah. So you've got some of the elements kind of already. So
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, do we want to show what we have coming up for next week, or somebody want to mention what we have coming up for next week? I need to pull up the chart.
here, let me share here. Let me see. Hold on. Got to get it to where. All right. So we do archive all of our webinars on YouTube. So you guys can scan this QR code. It'll take you right to the Texas Plant Clinic YouTube page, and you can go back and watch all of our previous webinars there if you're interested in that. And we do want your feedback. I think the survey probably needs to be updated for this week. So, so give us a couple minutes to update that. And then you guys can provide feedback on our event from this week. And then, yeah, coming up, we've got kind of a 4th of July theme for the whole month of July. And so next week, Laura and Paul, and Laura, I don't even know if you know this yet, so surprise if you don't. Laura and Paul are going to give an update on their experience at the California Spring Trials, which are really fascinating. You get to travel along the California coast and look at what all of the new nurseries are doing and releasing for the year. And so they're going to talk about what's new in red, white, and blue from those spring trials and share a little bit about their experience with us. And then the last week of this month, we are going to do Bugs and Fuzz, which is actually the name. Dr. Ong and Dr. Vafai actually have a column or a newsletter or something that they do for TNLA that's called Bugs and Fuzz. And so they're going to do a red, white, and blue edition, talk about some of their favorite diseases and insects that don those red, white, and blue colors. So I think that'll be really fun. And while he's not on today, I'm going to share that our dear friend, Dr. Irfan Vafai, has accepted a position outside of Texas A&M AgriLife. We're going to continue to have him on Chat with Green Aggies, but maybe won't be putting quite so much pressure on him to help us run it, or maybe we will, I don't know. But we'll probably do something special to kind of commemorate his transition when we have some time, but soak him up while you can, because they'll probably go from being a regular to just being the occasional guest here in the next couple of months. So
To irregular.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you again, Jeff and Michael. It was really very interesting and very informative. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we loved it. Thank you all so much. It was great to hear from you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.